Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. All right, my dear friend. So for today's episode, I'm going to revisit the spiritual foundations, because it's kind of like a series so far in these past episodes. If you've been following along, or if you haven't, this is something I've been doing. And I'm going to be going over the fifth spiritual key foundation, and that is, I am free. But before I kind of explore and dive into this, if you want to listen to the other key foundations, if this is the first episode, first time hearing this, feel free to look at the previous episodes before this one to follow along, just to kind of get a sense of something that I think is important. But anyway, back into this spiritual foundation number 5, the last of the series. So again, there are 5 spiritual key foundations that that form that perspective of, at least that contributes to my perspective on life and how I carry myself, my principles, if you will. So freedom. Let's talk about freedom. So it's funny because I always see freedom like an iceberg. You ever heard the idiom, like the tip of the iceberg? And I think freedom is the whole iceberg, but many of us see like the tip of it. Okay, freedom, yeah, sure. Okay, I get that. We understand this intellectually, right? Even just looking at it, look at freedom from the sense of like we have outer freedom, and which I think is part of the tip of the iceberg. Whereas, we can talk about, our rights, particularly, let's say in the context of like our rights in the United States of America, just for the intents and purposes, just an example. And then, of course, we can look at, just our freedom to kind of move around and do things and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's like opposites of like being in prison, like in the physical prison, like not free. You're there, as a result of consequences and stuff like that, of actions of our free will and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't want to go. I'm trying to avoid being intellectual here in this episode because that's not the point. But there's the outer freedom understanding. But then what I believe that is missing for many of us, and where there's not a lot of awareness and understanding, is the inner freedom. And this is where we look at the areas of like mental health, when we look at depression, anything within in your mental state, what's going on inside of you, what's happening. That right there, the inner freedom, that's the rest of the iceberg that's below the sea level, so to speak. Again, the outer freedom, the tip of the iceberg, the inner freedom, the depths of the ocean, the part of the iceberg that's completely submerged in water. So in many ways, it's obvious. Yes, we get it, right? But then what I care about and where I'm at in my life is the subtleties, right? So when it comes to freedom as a whole, or even just like when it comes to freedom within ourselves, inner freedom, we don't have problems with it. We don't have problems with freedom. It's the restrictions that bring us troubles. Or you could say it's the restrictions that create suffering within us. The inner turmoil or inner gnawing, where there's like this friction, this conflict happening within us. And let me go ahead and return what I said earlier about the word I said, subtle. And because of the fact that it's subtle, it can be subtle in terms of these restrictions. This is where why it's important to do the inner work, why it's important to raise your awareness, because that's through my own process for myself of having to raise my own awareness is why I'm in a different place when it comes to freedom, where in a way that I have a deeper appreciation. I understand part like the game of life here and what's going on, a part of why we're here, you know. Um, so I mentioned earlier one of the another key foundation that I shared earlier is like we're here to learn and grow, and that planet Earth is like a school, a university, where we're all here experiencing our own life lessons that we chose to experience, mind you, because we're energy. We always have been, we are, we always will be spirit. We're eternal beings forever and ever. We've always been. We've always had an existence. There's nothing that's never, no start or end, just is. And so when it comes to freedom, there are areas probably where we feel free, right? And, but then there are other areas where we don't feel free, you know? And just to kind of give an example perspective, right? Like let's take for example, like swimming. Let's say for the sake of purpose to keep it for the sake of simplicity and arguments and stuff like that. Say you're a good swimmer and like you feel confident and you're swimming out in the pool. You're swimming in the pool and just like you could sweep you can sweep. You can swim in the deep end, 12 feet or even more. I don't know how far what's the standard for swimming pools. I'd imagine it's 12 feet being the I'm sure that I've seen other videos of like pools are like so freaking deep. I've seen videos of just like it kind of goes down and down. And it's like so dark you can't even see down there. But anyway, most pools, standard pools are like 12 feet, whatever, right? Regardless, you know how to swim and you can keep yourself afloat and it's like easy peasy, right? But say you take yourself out of that pool and you're dropped in the middle of the ocean, right? You know, again, in that situation, let me kind of internalize it for myself. Like, okay, if I was in that position, put in the middle of the ocean like that, I'd be scared. I'd freak out, you know? Even though I can swim, I can keep myself afloat, right? And say that I'm not dealing with like the storm or anything like that. Say it's calm waters, but just out pretty far out in the deep, 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 deep water, right? Again, for the sake of simplicity, how I feel in that situation, even though I'm like, hey, I can swim, I can keep myself afloat, I'm confident in that, and yet I can be in that situation where I feel afraid and insecure, and where I don't feel quite as free, or in fact, I can. To me, that's an example of how I can actually fear my own freedom, because it's like, okay, it's nice to swim in the pool, there are boundaries, okay, I know where it's kind of things start and begin, where I can get out, where I can get in. But down in the pool, it's like it's just on and on and on. And that's like the reality of like the universe. And when it comes to freedom, it's like there's no limit to where we can be, to where how great, to how great we can feel, kind of a thing. Like there's no limit to that. And that swimming, that water example for me is just an example of just how I can how at times I can actually fear freedom. I can fear how deep it is. Can you recognize in ways perhaps you can fear your own freedom? Or you probably think, I don't fear my own freedom. No way. Okay. Well, let's take it a little bit deeper, so I can kind of begin to help you explore why I think it's important to have concern in this area. You know. So looking at, again, I feel like I'm gonna be jumping all over the place. I kind of did my best to kind of prepare my notes in a way that's kind of like smooth and like we'll see what happens. So bear with me here, my friend. And so so with the restrictions that I shared earlier about freedoms, because that's where we have a lot of problems. And what comes up in terms of like, okay, so what are these restrictions that you're talking about? What kind of restrictions that would prevent us from being or feeling free? And I would say our habits or our thought patterns, and they can, and it all can be sourced back to our first 7 years in our child development, growing up, being raised in our family, whoever was with us, we've they've had some influence on us in terms of our ability, how we feel. But but here's the thing though, like we when it comes to freedom, it's something that it's innate within us. It's like like think like our childlike part. We instinctively know that when we feel free, when we don't, simply because of just how we feel, how secure we feel. And it's think back to a time when, like, you didn't have any troubles or stress and stuff like that. We didn't have much to worry about, right? you know um, but then as we get older and then we start taking on the responsibilities and adulting and stuff like that, then somewhere down the line we lose touch of our inner child, that of just enjoying freedom. I had this visual, like, with my niece. She's like, she she's like in her early 20s. And but I was with her. We were in the same household when she was growing up, when she was just a baby. And I remember, um, I'd play around with her. In our apartment building, I'd play with her in the hallway. We kind of chase each other, and kind of play around, like pretend monster, and I'll pretend to get her. But she always loved to be chased, and just seeing her just running around, like, knowing that I'm chasing her, but she's getting a thrill out of it and enjoying it. That, and she was just like screeching on the top of her lungs, just like screaming and wailing, just because of just the pure joy and just feeling that freedom. To me, that's like a beautiful embodiment of of freedom. And again, and I'm sharing that because when it comes to freedom, it's just important. Again, it comes back to the feelings. Do I feel free, or do I feel something else? Right. um and and that's something else. What that is, if we're not free, if I don't feel free, then I'm in bondage. So, and that's, when I always heard people talking about the mental prison, and people will make arguments, and I would agree that mental prison is much more worse than being in a physical prison. Because even someone who's in kept who's in a prison, physical prison, they can still feel free even in that situation. Again, it's like, I keep saying again, it's like, because when it comes to freedom, it's about how one feels. It's about how you feel in your current situations. And that right there, in my opinion, needs to be at the top of the priority of, in terms of overall wellness. How free do I feel? If there are things, the restrictions that are threatening that are suppressing that, then for the sake of my loyalty to myself, I need to address that. I need to, again, get into this beautiful practice of journaling, diving deep within myself, building awareness. Because otherwise, my habits, my thought patterns, my perspective, all that stuff can hijack my own personal freedom if I'm not having cultivating some kind of practice of diving deep within myself, some kind of meditation practice to know myself better. Because that's going to be very crucial to unfolding more of my freedom. One simple way of, like, I think how freedom and how we can be very restricted. Think about when you're walking out, right? When you're walking out in the streets, whether in the city, in the countryside, but say you're in a city and you're going past people. How free do you feel to express yourself and kind of walk in the streets? Because from my understanding, when I kind of go out there, I've always been told, like, I have to present myself a certain way, stop acting goofy or anything like that. You know, like, like the most wacky thing I did to kind of embrace my freedom, I was like, well, I was at a intersection, a cross section, and I was waiting for the light to turn, and I was like right by this like lamppost, and I decided to just lean on it and just hug it. And I could already feel and sense that there was a guy nearby, a driver, who was just looking at me. I was kind of feeling the looks of like, what the hell is he doing? And for me, that was a moment of just kind of honoring myself and just being myself. And so where restrictions can come up, especially around people, it's like how free, think of it this way, how free do you feel to express yourself authentically? How free do you feel being yourself? Because let me tell you, where restriction can come in for myself is, what would the other person think of me if I do this or say this or if I act this way? What will they think of me? Oh God. Oh no. And you see, and in that thought process, those are restrictions. I am indulging, I am fueling these restrictions, these shackles on myself, stripping away my personal power, giving it to something outside. And in this case, the opinions of others or other people's free will. Why do that? It doesn't make sense. So I think people are at much different places when it comes to living authentically as it relates to their own personal freedom. And I think that the depth and degree of how free you feel within is the depth and degree how authentic you'll be with other people, in my opinion. Take it or leave it. And I think another ingredient when it comes to freedom, I think there's a component of motive behind it, you know? And one example, so like a motive, right? It's like the reason for what you're doing, right? What's the intention? What are you intention behind your actions? Behind, yeah. So just kind of diving into motive, right? And a simple example could be where it affects a lot of people. You know, growing up. In terms of like going to school, going to college, and although I don't necessarily fall into this, but think of someone who is in a family who puts a lot of pressure on them to get good grades and to get a good profession, and then they're spending all these resources, money, and time in school to try to get a degree, to try to where the motive in this case would be to impress one's parents. The motive in this situation, to me, I would evaluate that and say that that person is not genuinely free. They're doing something because they think they should. They think they're supposed to. If you ever find yourself doing something, you're doing something and you find yourself kind of detached and kind of taking a step back for a moment and you're kind of into your own awareness, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I involved in doing this thing or whatever it is? Or if you're involved with this particular individual, why? And I think in that particular situation, in that process, internal process, it's important and necessary to be honest with oneself. So there has to be a sense of clear motives. And what it means to have clear motives, I've come to understand and learn, is that it's understanding what's in it for me. Now, when I say this, it doesn't mean me first, me second, me third. It's not about being selfish. It's like, oh, it's all about me. Life revolves around me. No, type of thing. Let me dispel that right now. If you ever thought that right now, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. It's knowing that I'm in this school, planet Earth, to learn specific lessons, to grow and evolve as a soul, to raise myself in consciousness. I came here primarily to invest in myself. So it's like honoring what I made as a decision as a spirit who's always been before I entered the physical body that I'm currently am now. And looking at my experiences as lessons and like and whatever it is I'm doing, okay, what is it that I'm getting out of it? Because I think it's in everyone's best interest for them to really get to those deep questions about themselves so that they make the most of their times. And this doesn't have to be like a very deep, 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 very serious, heavy process. It can be light and fun. I don't know what that was about, but but I at least wanted to sprinkle that in there because that's also a very crucial thing. You know, think back when I mentioned earlier about your childlike part. You know, like you hold on one second. Sorry, I was just making this. Yeah, just think back about your childlike part. You know, it's just like feeling free. It's like again, we were all children once, and that part of us has never completely gone away. It's always there, available within us. It feels fun and light. You know, you could in some sense say carefree in some sense. You know, some truth to that. And so I just want to, you know, I want to encourage you to think about that as I'm kind of sharing all this, and it may perhaps be coming off pretty serious and stuff like that, and it is serious. You know, when it comes to my freedom, I'm going to speak in the eye here. It's important that I have concern about you know my sense of my freedom, and that being aware of situations and even that may or may not involve people where I feel these restrictions coming up. And also, I want to shed some light that when those restrictions do come up, though, it's important to work with it and not fight it or resist it and say, why is this happening? So then, should I not have it? Because it's not about not having restrictions. Having restrictions on our freedom is a part of our growth process, is a part of the lessons. As I mentioned earlier, there'll be parts in our lives, there are lots of areas where we feel free. I'm sure there are areas where you feel free and secure. But then on the same token, there are other areas that you may not feel quite as free. And if you have a sense of awareness of, if you're aware of that, of the areas where you don't feel as free, more power to you. More power to you, for my friend. But regardless, the restrictions, I'm not, in no way, shape, or form do we want to look at the restrictions like, oh, it's a bad thing. Oh no, I'm feeling I'm getting controlled. Because if I start doing this resistance or fighting this type of thing, it's then that's when I'm gonna get myself into deeper crap. I'm gonna get myself in more trouble. Okay. Um, when it comes to our freedom, we don't have to fight for it. We don't have to fight for our own freedom. Now, again, if you look at it from the outer freedom perspective, I'm sure you can make arguments like, yeah, we had to fight for our freedom. And sure, yeah, we did in the past. When we look at history, especially we're looking at specifically, in this case, me being American, looking at American history. Yeah, if we had to fight for it, sure. I'm not going to be ignorant and say, oh, that didn't happen. That's just, no, you're right. Yes, there's truth to that. But what I mean is, what I think is important right now in terms of where we're at this day and age is inner freedom. And that's the part where we don't have to fight for anything. We don't have to fight for that. You don't have to fight for your own inner freedom. You are free. No one can take that away from you. You can only give a portion of it, the power, through your own power, to other people, to ideas, to concepts, perhaps. Again, why I think it's important to examine thought patterns as well. And let me see here. I'm moving pieces around here because I'm kind of. I want to make sure that. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure I'm kind of moving along here, my friend. Yeah. So, let me see here. Coming back to where I was. So yeah. So I'm hoping that at this point you're beginning to understand how important it is to consider your inner freedom, right? Again, just focusing on inner, not so much in the outer. Again, I acknowledge and know that the outer freedom is important too. Again, that's why I kind of break it down to breaking down freedom from the inner and outer. But when it comes to the spiritual work, doing the spiritual work, the inner work is checking myself from my inner freedom. Because again, at the end of the day, that affects what I do or don't do. So, and something else that I want to address as well when it comes to freedom, I think I might have probably touched on a little bit before, But it's like living, I think freedom, the way I see freedom, freedom is a way of life. Spiritual freedom is a way of life, where it's like this practice of diving into within, right? These examining these restrictions, taking the time to be able to heal those restrictions so that they don't hold us anymore in whatever area and situation that we find ourselves in. That's a lifestyle. I've come to find that it's a way of life that it doesn't require anybody to be a particular way. You don't have to be, religious or whatever. You don't even have to believe in divine or in the spiritual. It's something that's nothing short of universal, because freedom is a universal law. Again, it's not exclusive to a religion or anything like that. It's a universal law. You can't, this is something that, even our spirit guides respect and honor. And I'm speaking about high souls, not souls in confusion or limbo, but high souls, angels, guardian angels, higher self. Just giving you some perspective, my friend, of what I'm talking about here. And I'm thinking about this here for a moment. Um, okay, so when it comes to, okay, so I mentioned spirit guides, right? And actually, to give it some to give you even a bigger perspective to consider, to think about, right? Up to this point, I hope you just kind of slowly digesting and kind of taking with a grain of salt, or if anything resonates, I appreciate helping affirm some things you've probably been working on and working through. So with with spirit guides, our angels, their purpose is to help liberate their brothers and sisters from the bondage, right? I mentioned that before, but check this: the bondage of ignorance. There's this saying where it's like, I've heard there was like a broken record or a cliche or something like that. I don't know. Where it's like, ignorance is bliss. Where it's like, the less you know, the better you off are, the happier you'll be. You won't be tainted by the realities of the world. In my opinion, that concept, that idea is a load of crap. Okay? If you want me to be real, I think it's a load of shit. If you want my honest opinion, ignorance is so far from happiness. Because again, ignorance goes back to like not even having consideration of building awareness. Again, it doesn't mean like I have to know everything that's going on or have to just this. It's more about the self in our journey. And if I choose to, so if I somehow think that ignorance is bliss when it comes to my relationship with myself, oh my God, I am going to be in the pickle, my friend. I'm going to be in the pickle. And I would say that you would be in the same position yourself too if you adopted that kind of thinking. Ignorance is bliss. Uh-huh. And then you find yourself without any sense of faculties, or any sense of I can't help myself. I help people. It's just, again, we all have the power. You have the inner power. You have the freedom. And it's like, the more I mentioned earlier, it's just like the more we take this practice of building awareness, the more we can identify those things of basically of how we're holding ourselves back. Because in reality, it's like that's the one thing when it comes to understanding like freedom, spiritual freedom. And consider this for a moment, because and I trust that your guides will probably remind you of this. If you don't consider it, just wait. You'll probably hear my voice at some point. They'll probably play this in your head, and it's like, oh shoot, oh my God, they're telling me this message. Well, who knows if you're open to it, right? If you're open to your helpers, your guide's message to you is that the only person who could ever stop you in your life is you. And that's never going to change. You can try to blame X, Y, you can try to blame your family, you can try to blame your partner or your friends or your situations, the economy or whatever, politics, all this. You can blame all of that. But that's all going to waste your time. And you're giving your power in places that it doesn't belong. You're fragmenting yourself. you're putting excuses up. And it's like, in that sense, for me, speaking in the I here, it's like I'm begging for the crumbs in this case, when in reality, I have the whole cake and it's available to me and it's available to each and every single individual. The more I hone in on my own personal freedom, the more of my power I give back to me. That's rightfully mine to claim. This power over other people are illusions. They're illusions. They're not a thing because everybody, again, freedom is a universal law. It's a universal law. Universal law, unchanging. And thank God that it's universal law. Thank God it is. Although don't get me started talking about mind control or anything like that. That's that's not for this episode at all. And again, whatever the intellectual theories about it, it doesn't change the simple reality. In fact, so where do I go? So our guides are there to help us to liberate us from the bondages of ignorance, because that's they themselves have gone through earth at some point in their lives, and now they're being teachers and offering assistance for others so that we can all make it through and graduate from this school. That's what we're all doing while we're here, having experiences, dancing in the rain, enjoying the experiences, all this beautiful thing towards the bigger picture of graduating, mastering the lessons that we chose for ourselves in this beautiful school we call Earth. Again, it's just ignorance is the main key arch nemesis of freedom. Ignorance. So if you ever hear ignorance is bliss, I'm like, I hope I would change your perspective on that, because honey, it ain't happiness. I'll tell you that. Because it's like happiness for me is something that's a gauge. It's like, just to kind of touch a little bit on happiness. It's like happiness is not something that I'm kind of have like as a destination. It's just how I feel in the moment, and I can choose to feel it right now, or I can restrict myself in this way and think that, oh, only under certain conditions will I feel happy and satisfied. Once I get more money, once I find the girl, the guy, whatever, right? Once I have this or this title, prestige, once I do this grandiose thing, then I'll be happy. I don't know if you can identify in those statements, in that silly voice that I did, of the restriction being created on one's own freedom. Can you identify that for a moment? So again, it's like those subtleties. That's why for me, from journaling, sometimes I'll even record myself on voice memos, because what I say and this and again, it's just being so honest. Like, okay, how am I feeling? Like really confronting my feelings and stuff, and then listening to them, and like just to kind of like, what's going on here? Like, again, just doing this beautiful practice and art of digging inside, you know, building that awareness. Because here's the thing, and this is we're kind of getting towards the end of the episode here. There's a lot shared here, my friend. Is that understanding yourself is the key to living a more fulfilling life. Okay, let me kind of repeat this again for you, for those in the back. Understanding yourself is the key to living a more fulfilling life. The more you build this awareness, the more you identify these restrictions, the more you realize, like I know I have, of it really just comes back to me. No matter what situations I find myself, no matter who I'm dealing with, it always comes back to me. In my life, that right there completely changed the game for me. Completely. In such a way where I'm playing it with mastery. I'm playing the game, yo. And I'm having fun at the same time. Woo! Let's go! Woo! Because you gotta have that mix of play and serious as well, And freedom, it's all light. Freedom is light, you know. Freedom, again, when you think about freedom, if if you find yourself, in a situation, just remember the feelings you had when you were little, when you felt free. Because again, that's innate. That's something that you've always had inside of you. It's there. It's always there. Nobody can take that away from you. And I keep repeating that because I have to repeat it to myself as well too. Again, reminders are good. Let me tell you, friend, reminders are good. It's good. It's good. So, in all of this, in all of what I shared, I've said a lot, and if I and if you find yourself overwhelmed and a lot to process, I invite you to just have patience with yourself, because and that's something that I really want to kind of wrap things up in this episode, because it's something that I'm always have to practice with myself, and and I see patience like many things, like similar to like confidence is like a muscle. It's like I have to exercise patience with myself. There isn't like I have to be perfect. Oh, I'm patient. I'm perfect. I'm patient. I'm perfect. No, it's not. That's not what it is, my friend. Not at all. Not at all. It's about developing it and working it, exercising it. And so, and when it comes to your own freedom and in this your own journey, your own process, just have patience with yourself, because I know my guides, when they've come close to me, I've had moments where I could feel their patience with me in this whole process, because they're not tripping. Our guidance, our spirit guides, they have a big picture. They're not worried about all this. They have a huge big picture, my friend, more than perhaps more than that I can sense at times. I'll be real. Let me be up. Let me kind of humble myself for a moment here. It's just like they can see things that I don't necessarily have an awareness of, and their understanding is that which transcends. It's like it's like the having that perspective and peace beyond understanding. You know, so all the more reason why they're such a huge asset, and I think it's a beautiful thing to kind of take this practice and explore with your own spirit guides, of just like, again, if it's something foreign to you, consider for a moment the possibility that you have company with you 24/7, right? But anyway, back to the whole patience thing. This is, no matter where you are, and I say patience because, and I'll say this, because I'm the sort of individual that I've been pretty hard on myself, because I'm very self-critical. I'm so hypercritical of myself, yet can be forgiving towards other people, which is like this unfair, this double standard that's like that I took, from somebody somewhere, that I internalized and deeply ingrained. And so, for myself, I have to remind myself is, everything's okay, you know. And I think also something I learned that put things in perspective is like, when I'm very critical of myself, when I, regardless of what it is, the question I'm asking now is like, why am I taking myself too serious? Why am I taking myself too serious? That's not necessary. I don't have to take myself too serious, and I don't think you have to take yourself serious either. So, if you're listening to this, I just want to say that you're doing a great job. No matter what you think, whatever your perspective is, oftentimes it's like we tend to think low, or we tend to underestimate how we're actually doing. You may be underestimating how much you're actually doing. And perhaps you may not recognize how things are actually working out the way that they're supposed to. How, how perhaps you're not recognizing how things are actually working for you, are actually working the best way possible for yourself. I say this because I know it applies to myself, where it's like I always tend to rate myself lower than what's actually going right. So if you find yourself in that critical, heavy period, it's like, well, how are things going right for myself? And you can put that question out there. You can ask your angels. You can ask God, how is my life actually going well? And just ask it, let it go, and keep your mind open, because you'll never know what may come through. And perhaps if you do, or maybe when you do, you'll come back to that childlike part of yours, and it's just that that sense of connectedness, that sense of, wow, hold on here, the magic within. You are a magical being, just like everybody else, no exceptions. You're doing great. You're doing awesome. And I'm cheering and rooting for you, my friend. Wishing you all the best in your endeavors. And at the time of recording this as well, you know, 2024 is about to wrap up and 2025 is approaching us. And no matter if whether it's 2025, 2030, or 2040, whenever you're listening to this, I know and trust that things can work out better for the both of us. For you, I know that. I think having some hope and some openness and allowing our angels, God, to come in and work in our lives, and it'll just help us know, see, understand, and feel the beautiful reality of what's going on, of just of all the things, of just to appreciate the beauty of life, warts and all. And I definitely am grateful for just like coming to this understanding, thus far in my journey, and why I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing, sharing spiritual with this podcast, sharing with other people in my encounters, wherever, because this is important stuff. I think the more people that feel free within themselves, the more, and and that's like building that relationship with themselves. We'll definitely be in a better place as a community. Just giving you a sense of a big picture and why I think this is important. So if you made it this far, this is the episode. Again, I want to thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you got something out of it. Take your time with it. I've said a lot. You know, if you're not sure kind of where to begin, go for what resonated with you in this episode. If there's anything that I shared that stood out to you, use that as a starting point, perhaps for journaling or to think about, or even have a discussion with a friend. You know, it's a beautiful thing to have people we can grow with and we can share, have these exchanges, and that's a huge reason why we're here. Because I mentioned earlier about investing in ourselves. We came here primarily to invest in ourselves, and that requires being involved with people and having exchanges with people. It's necessary. So whatever you have, whatever just trust yourself. And if you're genuinely concerned about your own personal inner freedom, stay committed, trust yourself, and you'll be on a better trajectory, better than what you could have ever imagined possible, my friend. It'll blow your mind. And so, regardless of what's happened this year, approaching into the new year, again, no matter which year it is, it doesn't really matter. I think going at the place of approaching it, like if you're not sure what to do in life, or you may feel lost, or if you don't know how next year is gonna turn out, find yourself. Start that. Make that a goal. Find yourself, and that will lead. That will allow more greater clarity within. I know this, and so this is a long one, y'all. Okay, I promise I'm not wrapping this up now. This has been a long one. So this has been another episode of Spiritual Engineered. Again, I appreciate your precious time and attention, my friend. And I'm your host, Alvin Cepeda, signing out. And as always, my friend, take care. And Happy New Year.